Okay. We are in Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Um, uh, 4 lines into the wide lines. Oh, good morning. Come, have a seat. So we're at 4 lines down on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Did you make a coffee here?
Yes.
Now you see I have the pour over.
I couldn't find the instant, so I had to wait for the pour over.
Yeah. So 4 lines down the wide lines on Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. Wait a second, just have a second ago. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Hiniach Yisrael basar al gabi chalim. If a yid left food, meat, on top of the coals, and Avid Kechavim came and he turned it over. You know, he fiddled. It was on the grill. The Avid Kechavim took over the grill master duties. Mutter. It's mutter. Again, we have to remind ourselves we're not talking about, OU kashrus or okay or kila kashrus. We're talking when Yidden are watching the whole thing. We're talking about only about bishul akum. So we say if the Yid started it and the guy ended it, he patched it with its mutter. So that's why hechidam. If we're talking about that had the guy done nothing, it would have continued to cook pshita. Obviously, the guy's patchking was irrelevant, so of course it's kosher. Didn't do anything. El lavdi lehapach lehav bashel. Elamai you're talking about where had the guy not done anything, it wouldn't have cooked. Amay mutter b'shulav kechav ninu. If the guy caused it to be cooked. Now, obviously, this does not conform with our understanding of how bishul akum works. Right? We all know that we've all been asked at some point by a guy to turn on a fire underneath something, and then the guy go ahead and put stuff on the fire. So I am not going to answer that question, but I will tell you that the conclusion of this Gemara is that as long as the yid did any part of the process, that's enough to kasher. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that point later. So why is it mutter? We're talking about where it would have cooked eventually, but it cooked in 1 hour. So we're not talking about where it wouldn't have cooked at all, but it would have eventually cooked from the Yid's doing it, but by his turning over the meat or I'm not sure if he turned over the coals, whatever he did caused it to cook fast. I might say that causing something to cook faster is considered bishul akum and it's also kamashmalon. I said no, since it was going to cook in either case, it's not going to be aser als bishul akum. Fact Gemara of Amravasi and Rav Yochanan. Koshu k'Michael ben Drusai, ein boy mishum bishul yavid kechavim. Anything that was previously cooked by a yid and it reached the level of Michael ben Drusai, which is generally a third cooked. Once it reached that, if it gets cooked, if a yid did that part and then the guy did the rest of it, there's no din of bishul yavid kechavim because it's already cooked by the yid. So what the guy is doing is not important, but the mashmais is only if it reached that point. But if a yid just started it and he put it on its way that it's going to be completely cooked, even if it's going to take a couple of hours, the guy can. If it's not yet Michael ben Drusai, the guy will make it into bishul akum. So this is Saiser. We just said that as long as the yid started it on its path, it's going to be considered that it's cooked. So tomorrow Hasav going to usvei besilta v'shakle avikechavim usvei betanura. No, that which we said has to be Michael ben Drusai. That's talking about where the yid cooked something. He cooked something to Michael ben Drusai, a third cooked, and then he took it off the fire. And then a guy came. He had his own fire, and he put it on top of the fire. The guy lit the fire and put the food on top of it. So it's fully being done by the guy. That's only mutter if it was done K'Michael ben Drusai. If it was less than that, it's not going to be mutter. Tanya Namihachi. Meniach Yisrael Basar al Gabe Gechalim. A yid can put food on top of the coals. You can put something on the fire, and the Oivik Chavim can turn it over until the yid comes back. It means you could leave your guy in charge. We're talking about obviously a case where you have a camera, so it's not Basar Shin Solomon Ayim, but it's not going to be a problem of Bishul Akum since the yid did it. Shefeses Isha Kdera Gabi Kiro Boss Avodas Gechavim. Magisa, or a woman can put a pot on top of the fire and leave a guy to stir it until she gets back from the bathhouse. I mean, Beis HaKnesses, or from davening. So, that's obviously a very, very long time. When the woman go to the Beis HaKnesses, it's not going to go quickly. There's no Isser, again, because as long as the Yid was maschel, he got it started. We don't care that... we don't care how long it's going to take, and we don't care what the guy does, as long as it was started by the Yid, as long as it wasn't taken off and restarted by the guy, that in which case it has to be a Kamaichel Ben Jersai. What if it's the other way around? If the guy started it, and the Yid is the one who's mixing it afterwards? Means he stays with it. The guy puts it on. He puts it on for a couple of minutes, and the Yid then tends to it until it's finished. The Gemara says our kasha was if the ending is at least as important as the beginning, although it's It seemed to be mashma the other way around at the beginning. The Rishonim talk about this, that the mashmais from before was, as long as you started it, it doesn't make a difference how long, as long as you prepared it and it's going to get cooked eventually, that's enough to make it cook, to make it that it's the Yid's working that causes it. So the Gemara doesn't mean to say that. What the Gemara means to say is that since the Chacham were matir, when a Yid does any part of it, there's no reason to be mechalik. So I mean, the Kal V'chomer over here is I know it sounds almost like lav dafka according to this. Kal V'chomer gomru yadav v'gecham doesn't mean that gomru is really more chomer than the beginning, because the beginning sets it on its best. And that's what the Gemara in Taka proves. It doesn't make a difference whether the Yid did the first part or did the second part. It's always going to be mutter. The only time it's aser is when the beginning and the end was by the Oivik Chavim, and the Mefarshim explain that means the second part is really the rule, that unless the entire thing was done by the Oivik Chavim, that's the only time you have bishul. As long as any part of the process, even the middle part, is done by a Yid, it's not going to be bishul akum. Saktima. Amravina. Hilchasa harifta. So we've been talking about bishul, talking about cooked things. Now we're going to talk about baking. If a guy put a cake or a bread into the oven, and then the Yid baked it, he patchked with it after it was put in by the guy. So this is an example of what we said before, that if the Yid does any part, the guy did the first part, he did the end part, and the Yid just in the middle, just stoked the flames a little bit, shapidam. It's not going to be considered that it was, like we saw before, pas of Oivik Chavim is aser. It's the same thing, the same gzeira mishum chasnas as the bishul Oivik Chavim. But as long as the Yid did some part of the process, that's going to be matir. Dog meliach. What about if you have a fish that was salted instead of being cooked? So we're not talking about tuna and salmon and sushi. We're talking about something that would not normally be eaten unless it's cooked. And the guy Instead of cooking it, he salted it, and that was the cooking process he used. Chizki is shara, Yochanan aser. Chizki says it's mutter, Rabbi Yochanan says it's aser. It's considered like Chizki says it's not cooking. It's bedafka cooking the chamu geyser. They weren't geyser on salting that caused the effect of cooking. Rabbi Yochanan says it's aser. It has the effect of cooking. Bayet sluya, a roasted egg. Now certainly a bayet sluya, a roasted egg is cooking. So what's the shaila? If it was done by a guy, bakapar shar Rabbi Yochanan aser. Bakapar says it's mutter. And Rashi says, since it's covered by a shell, it's totally encompassed, it's not considered like bishalakum. Bishalakum has to be some access. The guy has to have access to the food in order for it to come to be geyser. Since this is enclosed in a shell, we're not, the chacham will not geyser on it. Even though I can't really think of a logical reason whether it's closed or not has to do with chasnas, but I guess the point is the chama only geyser when you have access to the food. And the guy had access to the food, even though we're not worried about him using mixing in something. Certainly not with an egg. There's no way for him to get to it. That's not the problem. The issue is chasnas, and it's hard to understand why this should be different, except that that's not where the chama geyser. Kiyaser of Dimi Amar. We brought as two separate sheets, as Chizkiya said about the Dag Maliach and Kapara said about the Beit Sluya, but he says both of them are mutter. Yochanan also. Rechia Parva Ikla Bei Reish Galusa. He came to the house of the Reish Galusa. Amalei Beit Sluya Mai. They asked him, "What's the din of a roasted egg that was roasted by Goyim?" Amlu Chizkiya Bakapara Shov Rabbi Yochanan Aser. It's a machlek between Chizkiya and Bakapara that they say it's mutter and Rabbi Yochanan says Aser. We paskin like Chizkiya and Bakapara that it's mutter because they're two. Amlu Rav Zvid Lo Tatzisule. Rav Zvid said, "Don't listen to them. This is the psak that they're giving is incorrect. That means Rechia Parva had said that it's mutter, Rav Zid said it's aser. Hachi Am Rabbi Hachas Kavas Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi says the halacha like Rabbi Yochanan that it's aser. And this is bizarre. I don't know what to say. It is Eshkiu Neguta de Chalav Enach Nafshe. So Rashi says they fed him some kind of vinegar that was poisonous and it killed Rav Zvid. It means they were really kanoya. They really were upset that he gave a chamadik psak. They were looking forward to their roasted egg so much that they killed him for paskening that it's us. Tanarabon, hakaprisin, vakaplutais. These are sheimer leprihen. I mean slaf derech laachal chayin. This is a cover like a shell of certain kinds of fruit. Vahametalia, the Gemara is going to explain. I'm sorry, did I skip? No, I skipped. Hakaprisin is right. I skipped hakaplutais. Kaplutais are a vegetable. Vahametalia, the Gemara is going to explain what a metalia is. Vachamin and hot water. Vahakloyes shalahen, and the if we said before, the kali is usually when you roast grains, when you roast wheat. So you roasted some kind of some type of object, some type of food. Mutar. All these are mutter. Like we said before, some of these things are. We said there are two ways that you could avoid bishalakum. One is if the things are eaten raw, and some of them are if they're not ilal shulchan malachim. And we said that eaten raw also included if the cooking doesn't change the actual shape of the thing that the guy is cooking. So the klayas we said before, those are things the roasting something doesn't change its shape. The other things are either because they're not, the shape is not changed, or because they're able to be eaten raw. The Rishonim discuss which is which. So all these things are mutter. Beyet sluya asura. But a egg that was cooked is asur. This is a brisa. So this brisa is chaylik on the sheet on the the shita of Chizki and Bar Kapar that they said it's mutter, so machlokes. I mean, maybe that's why Rav Zvid answered, because he knew of this price and he held it was a different shita in addition to what Rabbi Yechanan. Who was it? Yechanan answered. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasiu Beis Dinoi Shemen, I'm sorry, oil. This we had in the Mishnah. Yehuda Hanasi, which not Yehuda Nasiya, his grandson. Which I can't even tell if he's a Tana or a Amira. I don't know if he's considered a late Tana or early Amira. Rebbe was the one who wrote the Mishnah. So I thought anyone after Rebbe is a Amira. But I was looking into it a little bit more recently, and it seems that he was just a late Tana. The Gemara's questions before were all that he's a later Tana, he can't be chalik on an earlier Tana. In any case, Yehuda Hanasi or Yehuda Nesio Beis Dinai Nimnu Olav Tirua. Like we saw earlier, he was mater the shemen. Like we said, he was scared of being called like Yosi ben Yezer, who was called the matir. So he didn't want to be called the matir. Tanya, he hamtalia, he pashlaya, he shiata. This hamtalia that we said in the brisa that it's mutter, if it would goy made it, it's the same thing. Habashlaya and shiata. My shiata. What is that? Doesn't help us very much. I'm Rabbi Bachana, I'm Rabbi Yechanan. Ha'arbon shnin de nafik hai of the Mitzrayim. Rabbi Bachana didei ama hashishin shnin de nafik hai of the Mitzrayim. There was a story that happened in Mitzrayim that came out of Mitzrayim, and one Manda Amr, Rabbi Bachana said B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan that it happened 40 years ago, and Rabbi Bachana said it happened 60 years ago. The Loi Pligi, they're not arguing about the Maisa when it happened, Mar B'Shnei or Mar B'Shnei. They said it at different times. Rabbi Chana said it 20 years before Rabbi Yechanan himself said it. Maisu Bizra de Karpasa, Ubizra de Kisna, they bought, Rashi says, Zara shel Karpas, so you could decide what Karpas is, and the bizra of flax, ubizra shavlalisa, and these are all the bizras, the zera of the shavalisa, which is another type of vegetable. They took these three seeds, the tari lahu bahadi adadi, the pshure, they soaked them all together in warm water, the shavkule ad makabel, umaisi chatzvi, they left it there until it started growing. Then they brought clay. Machatzvi chadti. I'm sorry. They brought new kalim. Umalumai. They filled it with water. V'tar bahu gargishta. They put in it clay. Madavikin bay, and they put these seeds that had started to grow into the clay. Lebei bani. They went to the bathhouse. Adanafku malavali va'achli minai. By the time they finished their bath, these seeds had sprouted, and they ate from the sprouted seeds. The kayari mibein sedereshayu atufra de karayu. By eating these seeds that had grown in this warm water, not hot water, it cooled them off from the bathhouse completely, from their head, top of the heads to the tip of their toes. So in any case, this is I guess this was done, I guess, with this was done by Goyim, right? This is the raya. So the way they explain this is, what Rashi says is, when we said before that where was the Rashi over here? Vai says that even if you put it in hot water, it's still going to be mutter, right? That when we said that the hamtalia is mutter, which is talking about these kind of seeds that were soaked, so Rashi says this comes to tell you that even if you soak it in hot water, they soaked it in like warm water, so it's even if you soak it in hot water, it's not going to cause it to
So what, so you don't need to cook it, meaning?
I guess they wouldn't be able to be eaten. That's right, because they're considered to be something that's raw. It doesn't need cooking, since it could be eaten. I don't know. This whole process sounds very bizarre to me, but somehow they placed it in something that wasn't hot water, so it's not considered cooking when you cook it in hot water. Since you can just do this process of putting it with clay and cold water or psharu or warm water, and causing it to cook, so it's not considered something that requires cooking. So the cooking of an ovid kechavim is not considered to be bishul. Amali Amr Rav Ashi Amali Rav Chanina Milin. Rav Chanina said these are all words. That whole story is just a bubba maisa, and who says it ever happened? Va'amri lo b'milin. Some people say it was done with kishuf, but in any case, you can't bring any raya from this story. It was either done with kishuf or it's not a true story. So don't bring a raya to the actual halachic status of a metalia that was cooked by a guy. Tan Rabban Hakusvan Shel Oivdei Kechavim. Hakusvan Psoila Shel Tmarim. Rashi says this is what was left over from dates. Shasam Hen Sheicha V'Cholten I say. The leftover stuff after you make beer, they used to make date beer. What was left over after making the beer, Shechuch Muchamin, that the guy cooked it up in hot water. B'yuruk G'dayla Asa, B'yuruk Tana Mutter. If it's a large pot, it's asa. In a small pot, it's mutter. So we're switching back. The Gemara is not mentioning this. We're switching away from bishul akum, and the problem here is because of the tam that comes out of the pot. So what's the difference between a large pot and a small pot? So the Rashi explains, because a small pot, you're not able to fit into it non-kosher things, as the Gemara is going to explain. What is considered a small pot? Anything that a very small bird, which is the smallest practical type of non-kosher thing that a guy would make in it. So if it's too small for that, so we assume this pot wasn't used for non-kosher. It's just being used for this, like 1 cup of date beer. You know, when you need your leftover date beer tea, then you use whatever you have at hand, but it's not normally used for cooking anything that's non-kosher, because you can't even get this bird into it. Frak the Gemara, the Dilma Admuya Admaya Admua Va'ailu, but maybe he cut up the small bird, and that's how he cooked it in this container, in this cup. So something that you can't even get the head of this tiny bird into it. So it's way too small. No one's going to bother cutting it up into pieces smaller than that. We have a man who says that even if it's a large pot and the guy uses it to cook, we don't have to be chayshish that it's awesome. Like kasha. How come on the nice and tam lifgam awesome? How come on the nice and tam lifgam mutter? The man the Amru said it's mutter even in a large pot is according to the man the Amru that nice and tam lifgam is mutter. I know nothing about this topic of. You could call my brother Yitzi, who's a Rav, but this seems to be saying that according to this Gemara, there's no chash when you use a pot of a guy. The pashtus, because first of all, it's going to the mandam and that the tam that comes out of a pot does not help the tam of what you're cooking in it. It's not a good tam, and we could be saimach a svek sveika that. Maybe nothing was cooked within the last 24 hours, and whatever it is does come out as bottle. So you put together enough things, and it's mut. Amr of Sheshes, Hai Mishcha Shlika da Amr Amai. This cooked oil of the Arameans, of the Goyim, also it's also Amr of Safra. Why? He asks, Rav disagrees. Why is it also? If you worry that it has mixed into it some yayin nesach. That was one of the issues that we talked about earlier, right? That we're worried about a mixture in of chaimets, of vinegar that came from yayin, stam yenam, or because the wine itself. Mr. Sorry, if you had mixed it into the oil, it would ruin it. wine is not good for oil, so it just makes things worse. It doesn't mix. And then if you're worried about because it's a kind of cooked oil, what's the problem? Oil, you put into salad dressing as it is. People don't cook oil to use it; they eat it as is. To the extent we use oil, we either use it for frying or we use it to eat directly. We don't cook it before we use it. If you're worried about the tam that when it was cooked by the Ovid Kechavim was cooked in one of their pots, so maybe some taste went from the pot that they cooked it in. Whatever tam came out of the pot was not fallacious. It was not to the advantage of the oil. It detracted from it, and therefore it's mut. Bomine Ravasi. Hani ahini shliki d'aramoy. These ahini shliki. What are these? Tomorrow. These cooked dates of the aramoy. Mai. Chol yeloi tibaylach. If they are sweet, I think it's sweet. It's not a kasha devad yishar. Miri yeloi tibaylach devad yasiri. Those are certainly awesome. What is this? Rashi says, sweet dates can be eaten as they are, so they don't need any cooking. So the cooking of it is not a problem. And if it's bitter that it requires cooking, certainly it's going to be asal bishul if they cooked it. But what about the middle type that you could eat it, but it's not so often eaten raw? The Rebbe Asu, Rebbe Asid, Umanu Levi. Levi is Rebbe, and he said it's Asu. Next thing, Shtisa, which is Rashi says. Let's see the Rashi that he explains exactly what it is. Tafshul Asu mikemach shel kloyos. It's something that was cooked with a flour made out of parched things, parched produce. So Yavsham Betana. Sometimes they're made from bean flour. But since they're too sweet, they add some vinegar to balance the taste. So this bean flour or wheat flour, as we're going to see, Rav Sharu. Rav says it's mutter. The cooking is not considered cooking. Avoda Shmuel v'Levi Asri. Asri b'chit Asri. They say it's Asri. The Gemara is going to explain what is the case of the heter and this. Bechiti usari, if we're talking about grains, meaning wheat and barley, then kuli amalei pligi d'shari. Everyone agrees it's mutter, like Rashi says, because on the grains it's not so sweet, so it's not typical to put in chaymet, so you don't have to be chayshver. But talpachi the chala kuli amalei pligi d'asit. But if it's mixed with vinegar, so I'm not sure. Did we go away? Yeah. So talpachi is the adoshim that gets mixed with vinegar. Everyone would agree that it's also ki pligi, but talpachi demaya. We're talking about where you took adoshim and you mixed it with water. Marsava gazrin hatuha, marsava gazrinan, and the other one holds we're not going. So that means the lentils would often be mixed with challah in order to take away the sweet taste. This person made it with water. So the question is, are we geyser any lentils that were cooked by a guy because of those I'm sorry, not that was cooked by a guy, that you got from a guy because of those cases where you get lentil flour that was made into the shtisa that wasn't mixed with water, but rather with challah, with chaymitz, which could be mayim, which could be yain stam yeno. You certainly would be geyser on the flour of adoshim that was mixed with water. The question is on actually from grains which is never mixed with challah. The question is, are we geyser chiti yasari agav the adoshim which are always us? Amar Rav, Trey min shisoi, Shadar Barzalai Hagiladi lo David. Barzalai Hagiladi provided supplies to David, and he gave him these two types of floured whatever this concoction is that they made with oil and corn flour. I'm sorry, bean flour or wheat flour. The Chsiv Mishkov, he sent him what to sleep on, a bed, the Safos and Kalim, Ukli Yaitzer, and the Kalim that he needs to create things. Chitim Usairim Bekemach. He gave him grain and barley and flour, Vakali, Upul Vadoshim, and Vakali, and then he roasted them, Upul Vadoshim Vakali. And he also gave him different types of legumes that were roasted. So the pasuk mentions separately the roasted types of wheat, the kamach from chitim and sa'irim that were roasted, and the poladoshim that was roasted. He also says you provided flour from that. So you see that there's two types of flours. V'hashtahu the kamafki tzoni l'shuki l'nardo. But now, no one worries about shtia. They take it out and they sell it in the shuk and narda from and no one worries about this chumrah. It seems that it passed away. No one, they never mix vinegar in it anymore. Zok the Gemara. V'kavshen shadachan lasa b'seichen yain. In the Mishnah, we had said another thing that's aser ba'achila but mutter b'hana is these brines things that they would pickle, they would put into it wine because we were worried about the tam of the wine or and chaimitz that we put into it. Amar Chizki lo shanu ela shadaka. This is only where it's normal for them to put it. Al b'yadua aser afilu b'hana. That which we said in the Mishnah that it's mutter b'hana is only where it's typical. It's not roiv, but it's typical. But if it's known that they do it, then it's aser even b'hana. I'm going to have to stop now because we want to make it to the 8:30 minyan over here, or sort of make it. I didn't realize how to do that.